Alrighty, yo, what's going on everybody? It's your boy Mr. DDG94 back with another reaction video. Today we're going to react to the decline of Quiznos. Without further ado, let's get right into it. The decline of Quiznos. What happened to Quiznos? Toasty. That's what I remember them for. Toasty. What happened to Quiznos? I ain't seen a Quiznos since 2006, bro. Swear to God, I ain't seen a Quiznos since 2006.
Now, I could be wrong about this, but I'm starting to get the impression that some of you want me to talk about Quiznos. I mean, look at all this. I've been getting these comments non-stop for the past year, and I think I know why you want me to talk about this. They were once one of the fastest growing restaurants out there, peaking at about 5,000 locations in 2007, yet in 2019, they have less than 1,000. That's 5 times smaller in a little over a decade. In 2014, they filed for bankruptcy, and that was after a different type of debt refinancing a couple years earlier. I'm just gonna say it, Quiznos has not been doing well. If you can find anything to indicate otherwise, I'd love to see it, because in my mind, this is a disaster. Oh, and I want to address something right away. Sponge monkeys. I don't even know what to say about this. Some say it's the best campaign of all time, some say it's the worst. I don't even know.
I thought the campaign was funny.
I can't help but laugh at it. You know, it's crazy to think that this may be the thing that's most remembered about Quiznos. Either way, I'm concluding that this didn't have any kind of significant effect on their success or failure, so let's try to find some better causes. The only other Quiznos campaign that I personally remember is this thing where at the end of the commercial they go, toasty. It was meant to show off the fact that they toast their subs, which was actually what most separated them from their competition from the very beginning. Going back to 1978, there was an Italian restaurant that just opened in Denver called Footers. The two people that owned it were named Jimmy Lambatos and Todd Disner. They soon had the idea for a new restaurant, this time an Italian-style deli, but they didn't rush into opening it. They made sure that they were well prepared by using their resources at their current restaurant to develop a few new recipes. One for this red wine vinegar dressing, another for the special type of baguette, things that I'd say are rather important for their potential new restaurant. In 1981 is when it happened. After years of planning, they opened the doors to their new Italian deli called Quiznos, and you can't be too surprised to hear that it was an instant success. Sure, it had 2 experienced restaurant owners with a clearly planned vision, but maybe the biggest contributor to that early success was the fact that they toasted their sandwiches. It was intended to bring out the flavor of the meat and the bread while making that cheese nice and melty. Yep. Seems like a no-brainer looking back, but to my knowledge, Quiznos was somewhat of a toasting pioneer. They call themselves the home of the toasted sub and are believed to be the first business to do it at this scale. For a long time, most of their business would come from a very specific group of people. It was from businessmen and women during their lunch break. They would open their restaurants with this in mind and use it to select the quality of their ingredients and therefore the price. Quiznos was not your high-end Italian restaurant, but it also wasn't your typical fast food restaurant. It was intended to try to capture the best of both worlds for people looking for something in the middle. By 1991, they were up to 18 mostly franchise locations in the Denver area. That's when the original owners decided to sell it to 2 men both named Rick Shodden. They were a father and son team, but the son was the one that took a bigger role, and these guys were concerned with expanding the business. By the end of 1993, they had more than doubled to 40 locations, this time spread out around a few key states across the country. And that's going to look like nothing in a minute, because starting in 1994, they took this expansion plan into high gear. Toward the beginning of the year, they had this public offering that raised over $4 million that was almost entirely put toward opening new locations. Here's the graph through the year 2000, almost at 1,000 locations by that point. They had the system involving area directors, basically people buying the rights to open restaurants in certain locations. They even shrunk the size of their new locations so they can lower costs and did a lot of other things to make expansion easier. Here's their revenue graph to go along with their locations graph, and it's also going up rapidly as you would expect. But I want to take a minute to break down where all of this revenue was coming from. At first glance, you may think it's all sandwich sales. Sell a $5 sandwich, add $5 to revenue, but that's not the case here. Remember, Quiznos was using a franchise franchising model. Looking at 1996, for example, they made almost $7.5 million and had 156 restaurants. Of those 156 restaurants, only 9 of them were owned by the company, and the other 147 were franchised. And that just means that other people own them, but they paid Quiznos for the right to use their name and sell their food and everything else. Here's the breakdown of the 7.5 million. 21% of it was royalty fees. That is the percentage the owners paid Quiznos for the right to sell their stuff. It was 6% of all sales. 16% came from initial franchising fees. That's the fee that's paid to Quiznos when someone opens a new franchise. The cost was about $20,000, and since there was a bunch of new franchises, that number was high. 19% was area director fees. That's that one-time fee paid by those area directors for the rights to open locations in designated areas. It ranged from 3 to 5 cents per person who lived in that designated area. 3% was other revenue. It's mainly bookkeeping fees that they charged. 2% was interest. That comes from those area directors. They offer financing if they couldn't pay the entire fee up front. 36% was sales by company-owned stores. That's those sales made by those 9 company-owned stores. And then the remaining 3% was sales by stores held for resale. That's just sales from company-owned stores that they own for fractions of the year before selling them to franchisees. It's like if someone has trouble operating one of the locations, the company may take it over and try to fix the problems and then sell it again, usually to someone new. So that's how Quiznos made their money, not necessarily just the business of selling sandwiches. Then, in 2001, the company was taken private once again. The people who owned it before the public offering in 1994, well, they rebought it. And from there, the expansion continued. By 2003, they had doubled their locations to 2,000, and by 2007, that number more than doubled again up to 5,000. And as I said, as far as number of locations, 2007 was their peak. It's been sort of a slow but consistent fall ever since. Now, you can point to a lot of reasons behind this decline, but I would have to say possibly their biggest issue was how they handled this franchising model. There's a few aspects to this. One, I get the impression that Quiznos just doesn't care about their franchisees, and I think they feel the same way. See, when you're a franchisee, you're sort of forced to play by their rules. You can't just go out and find your own bread. You have to use the bread that they tell you to use. It's understandable, their name and reputation is on the line. You can't be selling something that's not up to their standards. Plus, they'd like to keep everything uniform between their locations. The arrangement shouldn't be much of an issue, since after all, the franchisees and Quiznos themselves have similar interests. Since we saw that Quiznos makes so much money from the people running their restaurants for them, best to keep them happy. I just mean, it wouldn't be smart to say something like, alright, you're now all forced to buy your tomatoes from this guy over here, and he's selling them for $500 each. But that is an exaggerated version of what ended up happening. In the year 2000, Quiznos formed a subsidiary called American Food Distributors and told all of the franchisees that they had to buy all of their food and paper products from them. The distributor, owned by Quiznos, remember, started to charge all of these absurd amounts for these supplies. Many of the claims state that they're far above the industry average. Quiznos quickly started making a lot more money from this distributor than they did through the royalties that came from the restaurants. You can say maybe they were taking advantage of the people that they were supposed to be working with. This made it very hard for all the franchisees to make a profit. You wouldn't believe all the lawsuits surrounding this. The main one was settled back in 2009.
I can imagine.
But when the franchisees are not making a profit, they become unhappy. And that leads to poorly run locations, and in many cases, they stop running them altogether, which forces Quiznos to find new people to run them, which leads me to my next point. I don't mean to insult anyone that's operated a Quiznos in the past, but these weren't the best people to be doing it. You saw just how fast they were expanding. When there's a giant push to open hundreds or thousands of locations within the year, how picky do you think they are in finding people to run those locations?
Not at all.
Quiznos themselves have admitted that this kind of growth has forced them to choose people with little or no relevant experience, and it caused its brand to suffer and sales to slip. And think of the snowball effect happening here. To begin with, many of these weren't ideal franchisees, and then they were requiring them to pay crazy amounts for their supplies, so understandably, many of them quit. Now they're forced to find even more people, and at this point, word has spread around the industry. If I were looking to operate a restaurant like this, I'd probably choose one without a terrible reputation and multiple multiple pending lawsuits. So
Yeah.
now they're forced to settle even further or close locations. Once you start reducing locations and become a smaller business overall, that's less money for things like advertising, which can cause sales to drop in existing locations, which makes the franchisees even more unhappy. Do you see how things are getting bad here? That's how you go from 5,000 locations to 800 locations in a little over a decade. I would theorize that this 5,000 location business that's taking over the country back in 2007 was never quite as strong as we may have thought. That's what I would guess to be their biggest issue, but there's others. The recession, that happened during some of their worst years. It's easy to see how that can make things worse. Competition. The sandwich market has gotten insanely competitive. There's, well, Subway, of course, and then you have smaller chains like Potbelly. They're all taking away market
Jimmy
share.
John's.
And speaking of Subway, in 2004, they
Jersey
started offering the
Mike's.
option to toast your sandwich. And that was pretty much the biggest thing that Quiznos had over the competition. It's really not good when the thing that you're most known for is so easily replicated. Oh, and this never seems to be good. In 2006, they had a leveraged buyout. It was a deal that gave a private equity firm 49% of the company and left Quiznos with an additional $900 million or so in debt. That's led to an out-of-court debt settlement in 2012 and followed by a traditional bankruptcy in 2014. In 2018, they were bought, again, High Bluff Capital Partners this time. And it looks like hopes are high that they can turn things around. They say there's promise in Quiznos brand awareness and they think there's a spot for them in the market, but who knows? As of right now, Quiznos is, well, far from going away completely, but also pretty far from where they once were. I'd like to hear what you have to say. Thank you for watching.
Wow, so that's what happened to Quiznos. I was wondering what happened to Quiznos, because I ain't seen a Quiznos since 2006, bro. And they just magically just up and disappeared like that. Like, I think it's only like one Quiznos up in Wisconsin. I don't even think it's in Milwaukee. I think it's somewhere in like Wauwatosa or Madison or somewhere. It's in the white people territory. And then I don't think it's one down here at all. So it is what it is though. But yeah, man, Quiznos, man, y'all did it to yourselves, bro. Y'all ripping off the franchisees. Wow. Terrible business practices. Then you got lawsuits out the ass. Yeah, ain't nobody really trying to open up no Quiznos with y'all. Y'all are scumbags. So yeah, y'all deserve to go under. So yeah, that's just gonna about do it for this one. Decline of Quiznos. Yeah. That's just gonna about do it for this one. I'll see y'all in the next video. Till then, peace out.